You're now tuned in to By the Dipshits exclusive content. This is part 2 of a 3-part interview with O.D.B. last manager Jarred Weisfeld. Before we jump into the interview, By the Dipshits want to give a special thanks to our sponsors. What is Galaxy Wells? Galaxy is a metaphor which represents infinite space. Their goal is to dominate the infinite space in the digital publishing universe. Wells are the major corporation that possess endless amounts of content. What do? They turn content into currency in the digital space, the home of the NFTs. You want to keep your ownership and intellectual property? Then stop what you're doing and go to galaxywells.com. Now I'm back to By the Dipshits. Today's episode, he was rap superstar, legend, Old Dirty Bastard, aka Dirt McGirt, last manager, Jarred Weisfeld. I mean, at the time, to be 22, 23 years old and be very wise at that age, man, is super impressive, you know, because Dirty was older than you. And
much older.
Right. And you were managing him and pretty much kind of new to the whole management world. And here it is, you know, you laying down the law. I mean, they should have known at the end of the day that you were there ultimately for his best interests, because you kind of proved and showed it for the time that you was engaging with him as his manager. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Man.
No, I mean, we did everything we possibly could. It wasn't about the music. I mean, I'll tell you, I found out about 90 days before he passed. I knew that he was getting into drugs in a heavy way, right? So he and I had a heart-to-heart, and I said to him, Dirt, you have 3 choices. The first choice is you go to rehab, and you stay. He had never stayed in rehab more than 3 days. So I said, you stay in rehab. I'll visit you twice a week. Right? That's choice A. Choice B is you go back to jail. Choice 3 is I'm going to quit and I'm going to go to your PO and tell him what you're doing. So it's either A, B, or C. He goes, you're going to go to my parole officer? I was like, damn fucking straight. He's like, why? I was like, because I don't want to see you die. I'd much rather you be back in jail than in a coffin. Wow. So he said to me, he says, he goes, and he knew that I would do it. I wouldn't actually do it, but I would do it, right? Like he thought I would do it, right?
Right.
So, and I knew which one he would choose. So he chose rehab, and he went to rehab, and I kept my end of the bargain. I went there twice a week, and he stayed for the entire month. He did his entire month of rehab, and and then he came out, and it was just kind of like people were telling him, and nobody in his inner circle, mind you, right? We're not talking about me. We're not talking about Budo. We're not talking about his mom. We're not talking about Sean. We're not talking about Frank, his stepdad, right? We're talking about executives at different companies and in different places that had it in his head that he couldn't be Old Dirty Bastard unless he was high and he was drunk and on drugs. They had him convinced. And, there were some instances where, some other people would bring alcohol into the studios and while I was there, they had brought alcohol once in an apple juice container. So here I am thinking he's drinking apple juice, and I'm like smelling it. I'm like, that's alcohol. I go, everybody out of the fucking studio now. So I threw everybody out, and I took them home, and then I called up the person that did it, and I was like, why? What are you doing? I was like, dude, you got a guy that's sober, and so you tell him that he's not going to be good unless he starts drinking. So you bring him alcohol in an apple juice container, right? Who the fuck do you think you are? And that was kind of like the beginning of his downward spiral was that. And then it started becoming that I was getting in the way, and I wasn't allowed in the recording studios anymore because they knew I wouldn't allow any of this stuff. So they would record, and I wasn't there. I wasn't allowed there, right? And it turned into a a big issue. And that's when his life started going a little bit out of control. Well, very out of control when I wasn't, and I'm not saying this in a bragging way at all, but I was there to make sure none of this happened. That was my job, to make sure. I didn't really consider myself, I mean, I got him all his deals, but I didn't really consider myself a manager. I felt like I was more of like a manager / like sober companion, right? And when I'm not allowed to be there, nothing good was going to happen. So what I did was, I got threatened once in the recording studio, right? And there was about 15 guys in there that came in and like threatened me and like this and that and this and that. They were going to do this to me. They were going to do that to me, right? And so, and they were filming it, by the way. So not any network, but this individual thought it would be fun to film it. So he's got the whole thing on tape, right? And he thinks he's like a big guy. He shows up there with 15, 16 guys and real tough guy. And I was like, I'm leaving, right? So I leave. And the next day I have a meeting with this gentleman, me, Dirty's mom, Dirty's stepdad. And at this meeting, the premise of the meeting was let's get rid of Jarred. Either Jarred goes or Dirty's thrown off the label. So Dirty refuses to go to this meeting. So Dirty says, like, if they make me choose between them and Jarred, I choose Jarred. So we go to this meeting and I tell his mom what had happened, she's my co-manager, that I was kicked out of the studio, right? And this and that. And so I wound up having to hire a bodyguard. So I had a full-time bodyguard at 23 years old. Came with me everywhere because I was getting tons of threats, death threats, you name it, I was getting it. So here I am, I have a bodyguard that's with me, right? Which shouldn't be the case because nobody should have a clue who I am. And so the bodyguard comes with me to the meeting with the gentleman that wanted me out. And Dirty's mom and the father get there, and the person goes, "Who's that guy behind you?" I was like, "Oh, that's my friend Jerome." And he goes, "Well, what's Jerome doing here?" I was like, "Well, like what happened yesterday in the studio, like wasn't really cool. So, I figured, this would make me feel a little bit safer." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, yesterday in the studio when you showed up with 15 guys and, you threatened to break in my jaw. I was like, yeah, I kind of took that seriously. So I was like, maybe I should have Jerome around. He's like, "Well, I don't feel comfortable." I was like, "Yeah, the shit sucks, doesn't it?"
Right.
And he was like, "Well, none of that stuff that he's talking about is true." And Dirty's mom, that's the sweetest woman on the planet, stands up, says to this gentleman, who I'm sure you all know who it is by now, but I'm not going to name him by name.
Yep.
Says to this gentleman, "If you look at him the wrong way, if you talk to him the wrong way, I will beat the ever-loving shit out of you."
Wow.
And then sits down. And she goes, "Don't ever, ever let me find out that you said something to him that even made him think that he was, that he felt threatened." And he goes, "I swear I didn't do it. He's lying. He's lying." And then I just, my little smart ass remark, I look at him, I go, "Man, you filmed it. Why don't you just go get the tape? We could all watch it."
Oh,
right?
Man.
And he was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "You filmed it, man. Don't you remember? You big tough guy. You come around with cameras, filming it with 15 guys there. Why don't you just like show the tape? Let's all watch it. If you're telling the truth like you say you are, right? Then let's just watch it and prove me wrong." "I don't know where the tape is. I don't know where the tape is." I was like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "Well, let's listen to some music." So he starts playing music to get completely off the subject, and he asked Jerome to leave because he felt uncomfortable. And that was that. And then they realized that, his mother and I had a strong bond and I wasn't going anywhere. So the question was, do we work with them or do we not?
Exclusive content by the dipshits.